What ups? It has been argued that Tyler Perry films are racially degrading to blacks. It has been compared to minstrel shows. Black critics say that it holds us back. What is your position on that?
I think in a sense they're right, you know. In the overall aspect of it, I think that his films, you know, even though, you know, he tries to show black people in a positive light, and he tries to, you know, his movies are filled with like overcoming and endurance and everything like that. So I think that it's not something he's trying to do, but I think that, you know, when you look at some of the characters in his films, when you look at some of the characters in his films and in his movies, you know, I think sometimes they can be, you know, kind of degrading. When you look at, I think the character's name is Mr. Brown. Or when you look at even Medea, the character Medea, you know, sometimes these characters can, you know, show us, it can be degrading, you know, in the sense of, you know, there's always been a thing with black masculinity, you know, especially in Hollywood, you know, with every successful black man, you know, who is an actor having to be in a dress at one point in their career, and you know, seeing that this man, you know, Tyler Perry has made a career of being in the dress, I think, you know, sometimes people can see that as, you know, an attack against black masculinity. I think that in a way his films can be degrading, you know, when you look at a character like Mr. Brown, because the character Mr. Brown fits stereotypes, you know, it fits the stereotypes of Mantan Molan and the little kids who used to eat the watermelons and smile afterwards, you know. It fits these stereotypical images, you know. So I think in that sense, you know, it does hold us back.
Do you believe Perry's works are biased to upper class?
Absolutely. I think his works, I do think his works are biased towards the upper class. Because, you know, when you look at who it appeals to, you know, when you look at the people who are in it, you know, and not even just upper class, but I would like to say upper class black women, you know, upper class and middle class black women, you know, specifically, you know, because those are, you know, the lead characters and everything like that. So yeah, he appeals to the upper class, you know, whereas Spike Lee, you know, Spike Lee's films are more geared towards, you know, the inner city poverty-stricken young people, youth, you know, who are frustrated, whereas, you know, Tyler Perry's films appeal towards upper class blacks, you know, who, you know, aren't, I wouldn't say necessarily frustrated with things.
What do you feel about the feuding with Spike Lee and him?
Oh, the feuds between Spike Lee and Tyler Perry. I think in a sense is unfortunate, because throughout history, black, you know, especially black political figures and black leaders have been forced to be against each other. When you look at Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. When you look at Marcus Garvey and W.E.B. Du Bois. When you look at Malcolm X and Dr. King, you know, in the sense, you know, black. When you look at, you know, more recently, Jeremiah Wright and Barack Obama, you know, I think black leaders have always had to face off with each other. So I think it's unfortunate in that sense, but I think that, you know, I think the comment that Spike Lee said that Tyler Perry's films were filled with coonery and buffoonery, and I think to an extent he's right. You know, when you look at some of the characters that he has in it, the Mr. Browns and even the Medea character, and then, you know, a lot of time in Tyler Perry's films, you know, he'll have, you know, other characters. I think that the grandfather in it, you know, and these are characters who feed into stereotypes, I say, because of, you know, how they act, how they behave, you know, not because of how they look necessarily, or how they dress, but how they behave. You know, the character Mr. Brown, you know, he wears overalls, and he's always like the know nothing person. You know, people crack jokes at him because he's goofy and never know anything. You know, which feeds into these stereotypes. We look at Medea, like I spoke on earlier about black masculinity. So I think that Spike Lee's claim, he has a valid claim of saying that about Tyler Perry's films, but also you have to understand that Spike Lee's films have also had stereotypical images in them also, whereas he kind of show stereotypes, but the difference is Spike Lee would show stereotypes to break them down or to create some type of discussion on breaking these stereotypes down, whereas Tyler Perry's films, his films kind of play on stereotypes to be funny, and to sell tickets and to be comedic and be the comedic relief of his films. So I think that's how I feel about that. I think Spike Lee has a valid, valid fight.
Because of his success as a black man, is he obligated to be a role model for blacks?
I think absolutely he is. I think anybody who is a celebrity and who is in the national eye has an obligation to be role models for the citizens of this country, whether it be Brad Pitt or George Clooney or Floyd Mayweather or Barack Obama, or George Bush. I think anybody who's in a position, who's seen every day and is in that position has an obligation to be a role model. But when you look specifically at a Tyler Perry, I think absolutely. When you look at the situations that plague the black community of double-digit unemployment, mass incarceration, the drug problem, a gun problem, problem in the family. When you look at these situations that plague black people, I think that of course he has an obligation, because he has to be that person that we look to and that shines light on these situations. By him being a filmmaker and a director, he has to shine light on these situations. So he has a direct obligation to be a role model, if not even more,
Are you amused when you watch his work, or are you offended? Is it stereotyping or is it comedy?
I wouldn't say I'm amused. I wouldn't say I'm offended either. But I understand how people can get offended, and I understand why people can be amused. I think his films are intended to be comedic, because his films deal with so many deep, dramatic situations, especially when it comes to black women, because his movies cater towards black broken black women who have been broken in some way by a black man, unfortunately. But when you look at that, what's the question? My
is
bad.
it stereotyping or is it comedy?
I think that it is. I think he plays on. He tries to use comedy, to shine light on the situations, that plague the black community. But I think a lot of times what he uses comedy is stereotypes. Black folks. Some of his movies show black people just sitting on the couch cracking jokes, hee and hawing. Laughing, which is cool. You need to show, black people having fun, but at the same time, that can feed into stereotypes. When you go back to the 1920s, black people were referred to as porch monkeys. Sitting on a porch and doing nothing. So in a sense, his films, even though he wants to use the stereotypes as comedic relief, a lot of times his films kind of just perpetuate and keep them going. Especially when white people who don't know, who haven't seen a black person, who don't really know how black people act, see these films, they get that idea that that's what black people do. Some black people do, but some don't. So I think his films, even though he intends for them to be comedic, I think in the long run, they're stereotypical and are detrimental.
What is your overall opinion of Tyler Perry?
I think Tyler Perry's an artist. I do think he's an artist, and he wants to shine light on situations. I do, however, disagree with some of his methods. As far as how he plays on stereotypes to bring comedic relief to his films. I do disagree with his methods, but I think he is an artist. I think he has a good heart. I see what he's trying to do, but a lot of times, that message just doesn't come across. So as far as how I feel, but I think he does have a good heart. I think he's a brilliant director and writer and stuff, but I think a lot of times he plays on stereotypes, which can set people back, especially in this case, black people.
Well,
any other questions?
No, that'll be it.
All right.
All right.
Thank you. That's not